a 16-year-old school dropout from a council estate, made dresses for his sisters in his bedroom. 12 years later, he dressed Lady Gaga, designed Kate Moss's wedding dress, and became the youngest British designer of the year. He sent models down the runway dressed as rape victims. He spray-painted dresses with industrial robots. He put a double amputee on carved wooden legs. The fashion world called him a genius. But on February 11, 2010, his housekeeper found him hanging in his wardrobe. He was 40 years old. His mother's funeral was scheduled for the next day. This is the story of Alexander McQueen, the working-class kid who conquered fashion, only to be destroyed by the very industry that made him a legend. Lee Alexander McQueen was born on March 17, 1969, in Lewisham, one of London's roughest districts. His father, Ronald, drove a taxi. His mother, Joyce, taught social science. They lived in public housing with 6 kids. Most fashion designers come from money, not Lee McQueen. While other kids played football, Lee sketched dresses. At 6 years old, he told his mother he was gay. At 9, he was making clothes for his 3 older sisters. His family called him the Pink Sheep, a play on black sheep, because he was different, always different. At 16, Lee dropped out of school with just one qualification, an O-level in art. No connections, no money, no formal training, but his mother Joyce saw a news report about a shortage of apprentices on Savile Row, the street in London where the world's most expensive suits are handmade for royalty and billionaires. "Why don't you try that?" she suggested. So Lee walked into Anderson and Shepherd, one of Savile Row's most prestigious tailors, and asked for a job. They hired him. At 16 years old, Lee McQueen was cutting suits for Prince Charles and Mikhail Gorbachev. Legend has it that Lee once embroidered profanity into the lining of a suit destined for Prince Charles. Whether it's true or not, the story tells you everything about Lee McQueen: talented, rebellious, and completely uninterested in respecting authority. After 2 years, he moved to Jeeves and Hawkes, another Savile Row house, then to Angels and Bermans, making theatrical costumes for shows like Les Miserables. At 20, he worked for Japanese designer Koji Tatsuno, then Italian designer Romeo Gigli in Milan. It was at Romeo Gigli's atelier that Lee's rebellious streak truly showed. Gigli made him remake a jacket 5 times. Furious, Lee complied. But on the final fitting, when Gigli pulled apart the lining, he found a message stitched inside. "Fuck you, Romeo." By 21, Lee had more tailoring experience than most designers twice his age, but he had no formal fashion education. So in 1990, he applied to Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design in London. He didn't apply as a student. He applied to be a tailoring instructor. They rejected him. He was too young to teach. But they offered him something else, a spot in their master's degree program. It was there, in his graduation show in 1992, that everything changed. Lee's final collection was called Jack the Ripper Stalks His Victims. Inspired by the Whitechapel murders, it featured blood-red linings, sharp tailoring, and a darkness that shocked everyone who saw it. In the audience sat Isabella Blow, a fashion editor with aristocratic roots, massive hats, and an eye for spotting genius. She bought Lee's entire collection for $5,000, paying it off in weekly installments of $100. More importantly, she became his patron, his champion, his surrogate mother. Isabella made him change his name. Lee sounded too common for fashion. "Use your middle name," she insisted. "Alexander sounds grander, more romantic." And so, Lee McQueen became Alexander McQueen. Isabella called every fashion contact she had. She raved about this brilliant young designer. She moved him into her London flat when hat designer Philip Treacy moved out. She fought for him, believed in him, loved him like a son. With Isabella's backing, McQueen launched his own label in 1992. His second collection introduced the Bumpster, pants cut so low they revealed the top of the buttocks and bottom of the spine. Fashion critics were scandalized, but young people loved them. The Bumpster became McQueen's first signature, but it was his runway shows that made him a legend. In March 1995, McQueen presented Highland Rape, Models stumbled down the runway in torn tartan dresses, flesh exposed, looking brutalized and blood-splattered. The British press exploded. They called McQueen a misogynist. They accused him of glamorizing violence against women, but they misunderstood. The collection wasn't about sexual assault. It was about the rape of Scotland by England during the Highland clearances of the 18th and 19th centuries. McQueen's own ancestors had been forcibly evicted during this ethnic cleansing. The show was about history, about violence, about his sister who'd suffered domestic abuse. It wasn't about actual rape, McQueen said later. It was about what happened to my ancestors. The controversy made him famous, and with fame came opportunity and pressure. In October 1996, at just 27 years old, McQueen was appointed head designer at Givenchy, one of Paris's most prestigious fashion houses, owned by luxury giant LVMH. He replaced John Galliano, who'd moved to Dior. Hubert de Givenchy, the house's founder, called McQueen's appointment a total disaster. The French fashion establishment was horrified. This working-class British punk was going to design for a house known for dressing Audrey Hepburn? McQueen fired back immediately, calling Givenchy irrelevant. His first Givenchy couture show in January 1997 was a Greek mythology-inspired collection of gold and white designs. Paris critics hated it. They called it chaos. McQueen himself later admitted to Vogue it was crap. But there was a problem. McQueen now had two jobs, his own label and Givenchy. That meant producing 10 to 14 collections per year. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, couture, ready-to-wear, menswear, for two different brands. The pressure was inhuman. 5 weeks after his Givenchy disaster, McQueen staged his own London show. It's a jungle out there. After watching a nature documentary about gazelles being hunted by lions, he declared, "That's me. Someone's chasing me all the time, and if I'm caught, they'll pull me down." The New York Times called him fashion's closest thing to a rock star. But despite the praise for his own work, McQueen hated Givenchy. There was a creative gulf between what he wanted to make, dark, experimental, provocative, and what Givenchy expected, chic, elegant, tasteful. "It constrained my creativity," McQueen said later. "I treated Givenchy badly. It was just money to me. But there was nothing I could do. The only way it would have worked was if they'd allowed me to change the whole concept of the house, and they never wanted me to do that." Still, during his Givenchy years, McQueen created some of fashion's most memorable moments. In spring 1998, his Untitled show, originally titled Golden Shower until the sponsor objected, featured a runway flooded with water bathed in yellow light. It was stunning, haunting, a masterpiece. In September 1998, for his number 13 collection, McQueen did something unprecedented. He sent Amy Mullins, a double amputee and Paralympic athlete, down the runway wearing intricately hand-carved wooden prosthetic legs. The finale was even more spectacular. Model Shalom Harlow stood on a rotating platform wearing a simple white dress, while two industrial robotic arms from a car factory spray-painted her with yellow and black paint. Harlow later called it an aggressive sexual experience and likened it to the moment of creation. The fashion world had never seen anything like it, but success came with a cost. In 2000, Gucci bought 51% of McQueen's company for an undisclosed sum, giving him the capital to expand globally. It should have been a triumph, but Isabella Blow, the woman who discovered him, championed him, and loved him, was left behind. When the Gucci deal happened, Isabella wasn't offered a role, no job, no contract. According to her friend Daphne Guinness, she was upset that Alexander didn't take her along when he sold his brand to Gucci. Once the deals started happening, she fell by the wayside. Everybody else got contracts, and she got a free dress. The relationship between McQueen and Blow became strained. She felt abandoned, betrayed. She had made him, and now he was leaving her behind. In March 2001, McQueen's contract with Givenchy ended. He didn't renew. He was free, but exhausted, burned out, and about to lose the person who mattered most. McQueen was now designing for his own label full-time, but the work was relentless. By the mid-2000s, he was creating 14 collections per year. The shows became even more theatrical, more ambitious, more expensive. But behind the scenes, something was breaking. On May 6, 2007, Isabella Blow told friends she was going shopping during a weekend house party. Instead, she drank weed killer. She died the next day at age 48. It was her third suicide attempt. She'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and ovarian cancer. She'd battled depression for years, but her death devastated the fashion world, and no one more than McQueen. Rumors swirled that McQueen and Isabella had been feuding, that there was a rift. McQueen angrily denied it. He dedicated his spring 2008 collection, La Dame Bleue, to Isabella. He wept openly at her funeral. And in a 2008 interview, McQueen said something haunting. "I learned a lot from her death. I learned a lot about myself. That life is worth living." But the truth was darker. According to a biography by Andrew Wilson, McQueen had confided in a colleague about wanting to stage his own suicide during a fashion show. He described building a glass box and shooting himself on stage, so all his brains would drip down the glass. He was fascinated with death, obsessed with it. And after Isabella's suicide, that obsession deepened. McQueen had also been HIV positive since the 1990s. He struggled with cocaine addiction. He battled anxiety, depression, and insomnia. His psychiatrist later testified that McQueen suffered from the pressures of his high-profile career. Creating 14 collections per year was killing him. The fashion industry's relentless pace, show after show, season after season, never stopping, was unsustainable. But McQueen couldn't stop, or wouldn't. Then, on February 2, 2010, his mother, Joyce, died. McQueen was mentally very close to his mother. She was the one who'd encouraged him to pursue tailoring, the one who'd supported him when he came out, the one who believed in him when no one else did. He felt that was the one link that had gone from his life, his psychiatrist said, and there was very little to live for. 4 days after her death, McQueen posted on Twitter, "I'm letting my followers know my mother passed away yesterday. If it she had not me, nor would you." A few moments later, but life must go on. But life didn't go on. Joyce's funeral was scheduled for February 12th. McQueen knew he couldn't bear to attend. His beloved dog, Minter, had also been diagnosed with cancer. Everything was crumbling. On the night of February 10th, McQueen had dinner at Scott's restaurant with members of his studio. Colleagues said he seemed very together. Afterward, his close friend Annabelle Nielsen returned with him to his Mayfair flat. She left at 3 a.m. She was the last person to see Alexander McQueen alive. That night, McQueen researched suicide methods on Yahoo. He took a substantial amount of cocaine. He took sleeping pills. He took tranquilizers. He tried to slash his wrists in the shower. And then, at some point during the night of February 10th or the early morning of February 11th, Lee Alexander McQueen hanged himself in his bedroom wardrobe. His housekeeper found him at 9:30 a.m. On the back of a book, police found a note scrawled in his handwriting. "Look after my dogs. Sorry, I love you, Lee." The coroner later ruled that McQueen had killed himself while the balance of his mind was disturbed. Toxicology reports showed significant levels of cocaine, sleeping pills, and tranquilizers in his system. The official cause of death: asphyxiation and hanging. He was 40 years old. His mother's funeral was the next day. So what really killed Alexander McQueen? Was it the death of his mother, the suicide of Isabella Blow, the relentless pressure of the fashion industry, the drugs, the depression, the HIV diagnosis, the creative burnout from producing 14 collections a year? Or was it all of those things? A perfect storm that crushed a brilliant mind. McQueen once said about fashion, "The turnover is just so quick and so throwaway. There is no longevity." He was talking about clothes, but he could have been talking about the designers themselves. The fashion industry demands everything. It demands beauty and innovation and shock value and profit, season after season, year after year, without rest. And when you can't deliver anymore, it replaces you. McQueen delivered for 18 years, He created some of the most breathtaking, controversial, and influential designs in fashion history. He won British Designer of the Year 4 times. He received a CBE from the Queen. He dressed the world's biggest stars. But in the end, the industry he conquered also destroyed him. After his death, Gucci announced that the Alexander McQueen business would continue without its founder. Sarah Burton, his longtime assistant, took over as creative director. She designed Kate Middleton's wedding dress a year later. The brand is worth hundreds of millions today, but the man behind it, the working-class kid from Lewisham who changed fashion forever, is gone. In his will, McQueen left $50,000 for his dogs so they could live in luxury for the rest of their lives. 3 years after his death, the Metropolitan Museum of Art held a retrospective exhibition of his work called Savage Beauty. It became one of the museum's most visited exhibitions in history. Over 660,000 people came to see the work of the designer who'd hanged himself in his wardrobe. McQueen's final collection, Angels and Demons, was 80% complete when he died. His design team finished it. Fashion editors said it was hard to watch because it showed how obsessed McQueen had been with the afterlife. The final outfit was a coat made entirely of golden feathers. Perhaps McQueen knew all along how his story would end. Perhaps that's why death haunted his work. The skulls, the darkness, the violence, the beauty wrapped in tragedy. Or perhaps he was just a man carrying too much pain in a world that demanded perfection. What really killed Alexander McQueen? Maybe it was fashion itself.